Before we get into today's video, I want to draw your attention to something that matters way more than whatever it is that I'm watching. I am sure all of you are aware of what has been going on in the US. Now, before you get all "I'm not here for politics" on me, please remember that fighting for equality and human rights, fighting against injustice and brutality should never be about politics because it is simply about humanity. We should never stop learning and listening. We should never stop trying to better ourselves as humans, and we should never turn our backs on people who need our help. So below this video, I am going to link some resources and ways to help, and I sincerely hope you take a look and do what you can, as well as do your own research. Thank you. Hey everyone, I'm Marianna, this is Impression Blend, and it is time for another monthly wrap-up. So today, I'm going to be talking about everything I watched in May. This one is going to be a bit shorter than usual because the majority of what I watched last month was actually Black Mirror. I binged the entire series in May, and I do have a separate video all about that where I rank and review every single episode. So if you haven't seen that yet, it's my previous video. I will leave a link to that in the info box below, as well as over here in the pop-up card. So that might as well be part one of my wrap-up. But as for the rest, I did manage to squeeze in 7 more films, the first one of which is 13 Ghosts. 13 and Ghosts? That spelling's really weird. Believe it or not, this was my first time watching 13 Ghosts. I remember not having a lot of interest in this movie because it didn't look that great, but over the years, I have heard people say that this is their guilty pleasure or not so guilty pleasure. So many people genuinely enjoyed this one, some of them even listed as one of their favorites, and yet it is rated so low on Rotten Tomatoes and similar websites. So I thought, it's time. It's time for me to finally see what this is all about. And as most of you know, this is a 2001 horror film that revolves around a family that inherits a house, not knowing that there is a prison for ghosts in the basement. And Matthew Lillard is in this one, of course, doing his over-the-top character thing. Listen, I completely understand why people enjoy this movie. It is kind of like a haunted house roller coaster, specifically because the editing here is absolutely insane and was kind of hurting my brain. It was not as bad as I thought it was going to be. I actually did enjoy it. It's a fun movie to watch once. I get why people enjoy it so much. And it did give me a dose of 90s nostalgia. Actually, this whole movie feels very 90s, even though it is made in 2001. Something about that style just reminded me of late 90s, and I can't help loving that. The other thing that's really cool about this movie are the ghosts. The way they're designed, the way they look is really interesting and really detailed. I just wish we got to see them more without all the crazy cutting that's going on in this film. But obviously, the story itself and the characters in this film, if you've seen the movie, you have to admit that they're not the best, to say the least. I would actually love to see this film remade, and I know this is already a remake, but I think we should remake something like this in capable hands of a director who knows what they're doing and with a good script, and I think this could be a very interesting film. I think it has a ton of potential. But as is, I did give it a 6 out of 10 because I enjoyed it. I didn't hate it. It was entertaining. Sometimes it was unintentionally funny, so I had fun with it, but it's not great. No. Next, I rewatched Ready or Not. This showed up on HBO in May, and I just had to rewatch it immediately because this movie, this is a fun horror film. If you missed Ready or Not in theaters last year, I highly recommend you give it a try now because this movie is equal parts funny and thrilling, and that is a combination that is just guaranteeing high levels of entertainment. Starring the amazing Samara Weaving, who is quickly becoming one of my favorites because she just has so much charisma and personality. The story is about a young woman who ends up marrying into a really weird rich family, and their tradition for the wedding night is to play a game. Well, our girl ends up unknowingly choosing the wrong game, and now this whole thing is turning into a night of survival for her, as the rest of the family is trying to kill her. Fun games they're playing there, right? As I already said, this film is very entertaining, and rewatching it was just as much fun, if not more fun, than it was watching it for the first time. I will also say that the visuals are beautiful. The setting of Old Rich Mansion is absolutely gorgeous and very atmospheric. Plus, Grace, the lead character, running around in her beautiful wedding dress that just gets shorter and dirtier as she becomes more and more of a badass. It's a lot of fun. I ended up keeping my rating of an 8 out of 10, and I can easily see myself rewatching this again and again because this is a solid film. Next up, prepare yourselves for this one. I finally watched The Goonies. Yes, this was my first time watching The Goonies. As a lot of you know, I did not grow up in the US, so there is a whole layer of 80s movies that I just haven't seen. It's not just 80s movies, it's generally childhood and cult classics that I missed out on, and a lot of them happen to be 80s films. And I have to say, I am genuinely sad that this was not a part of my childhood because I 100% know that I would have loved this as a kid, and this would have been one of my favorite films growing up because you have a pirate's map, a treasure hunt, some weird people, some underground caves, you have traps and danger and adventures, but most importantly, you have an amazing group of friends that are sticking together and trying to get through whatever they got themselves into. I can totally see why this is a classic and why people have these warm, nostalgic feelings when it comes to the Goonies. I completely understand all of that, and I would have loved to feel the same way. Watching it for the first time now was definitely still a treat for me, despite any kind of flaws or dated elements that this film has, which it does. However, it was still fun. You just can't help loving these kids and their crazy adventures and the humor and good spirit of all of this. So I ended up rating the movie a 7 out of 10 because, like I said, it is a little bit dated and it's not perfect, but I absolutely did enjoy it, and it made me miss this type of 80s movie making that doesn't really happen that often anymore. Next up, I decided to watch Wild Rose, mainly because of Jessie Buckley, who plays the lead character in this one. I haven't heard a lot of people talk about this film, but it popped up for me on Hulu and I decided why not. This is about a young Scottish singer who dreams of becoming a country artist in Nashville, but she just got released from prison. She has 2 kids, so life is pretty complicated for her right now. Here's what I'm going to say. I am pretty surprised by this film because generally unlikable characters as lead characters can be a struggle for me in film pretty often. And this film's lead character is definitely the case of that because she is somebody who refuses to take responsibility for what she needs to take responsibility for. She is kind of trying to ignore what is going on in her life in pursuit of her dreams, which, yes, I completely relate to pursuing your dreams. However, there are pressing issues that she is just pretending are not happening, and that makes her hard to like and hard to understand. She is kind of her own problem. But despite being a really frustrating person, the way the film develops her character is just brilliant, and I ended up enjoying the film so much. It is a really good and a really underrated movie that I think more people need to see. I don't really want to say more because I don't want to spoil anything about how this plot develops, but I will say that while there are things in this film that happen just as you expect them to happen, It does end up surprising you on a few occasions, and it's not really your typical Cinderella story. That's where I'm going to leave it. Check it out on Hulu if you're subscribed to that. And I ended up giving this film an 8 out of 10, and I am absolutely down to watch pretty much anything Jessie Buckley is in. Then I finally watched Portrait of a Lady on Fire. You guys have been telling me that this is on Hulu and I have to watch it immediately. I unfortunately did not get the chance to see it in theaters. It wasn't playing anywhere around me. And finally, I got around to seeing it, and it is a beautiful film. It is just as wonderful as everybody says it is. Of course, I really enjoyed it. If you don't know what this is about, it's a French film set at the end of the 18th century. And it is about a female painter who comes to an isolated island to paint a wedding portrait of a young woman. First of all, as cliche as this is going to sound, but every shot of this film looks like a painting. It looks fantastic. It's one of the most gorgeous looking films I have ever seen. It is just beautifully shot, and I am surprised about the lack of nominations for this film. I mean, unfortunately for Portrait of a Lady on Fire, it came out the same year as Parasite, which, as you guys know, was my favorite film of last year. But any other year, this film would be all over the Oscars because it is that good. Also, the two lead actresses as well as the supporting cast are absolutely wonderful. You believe every single relationship in this film. You feel everything they feel. You understand every look and every move. It is fantastic. I swear, at some points I was wondering if the director and the crew somehow time traveled, because these women look like they are from a different century. It's amazing. This film is artistic and understatedly romantic. It is gorgeous, and there is a reason why everybody is loving it. I will say that the pacing is very leisurely throughout the entire thing, and that's not a bad thing. This is just something that you should know if you haven't seen this film and you're thinking about watching it. I also am kind of still undecided about the rating for this one. I initially rated it a 9 out of 10. Then I thought about it and I decided it was more of an 8 out of 10 for me personally, because I can't really see myself watching it again. But it feels like that's a low rating for how wonderful this film is, so it might actually be a 9 out of 10. At the moment, it's an 8 out of 10 on my Letterboxd, but I might keep changing it. There is a subplot in there that I don't want to identify because it would be considered a spoiler. It's pretty far into the film, but I feel like that part in particular just came out of nowhere, and while it makes sense why it's in the film, the way it's written into the story just seems out of left field. And that was a big part of why I'm struggling with this rating. But yeah, gorgeous film, beautiful story. If you haven't seen it yet, it's on Hulu, so check it out. Then I decided to go back to the early 2000s once again and watch Phone Booth, another film that a lot of people have seen that I haven't. I have heard so many conflicting opinions about this one. Some people really enjoy it and think it's a great thriller. Some people think it is not good at all. For me, it was better than I expected it to be. I thought it was going to be really cheesy and really cliche and very dated, which there are parts of it that are like that. However, overall, I think it is a pretty solid thriller. Starring Colin Farrell as a New York publicist who is not the greatest person out there. Let's just call it what it is. He's kind of a jerk. But he receives a phone call at a phone booth that completely changes his day, because turns out there is a sniper pointing a gun at him, and as the situation keeps escalating, he has to do what he is being told or very bad things are going to happen. This film feels very early 2000s. It just gave me some kind of odd nostalgia for the early 2000s, even though it does come with a portion of cheese. there's something about that film that just made me feel like I missed the early 2000s. I can't explain it. The style of it and the way the story unfolded just made me smile, and it is effective. I think you can absolutely watch it for the first time right now and still enjoy it. Just, you know, understand that it is going to be a little bit dated. I ended up giving this film a 7 out of 10. I don't have a ton to say about it other than it is an effective thriller, and Colin Farrell as the lead is obviously really, really good. So if you haven't seen it, it's worth checking out. Also something that's on Hulu, by the way. Clearly, I have been utilizing my Hulu subscription in May. Finally, the last thing that I watched in May was Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban. This is my favorite Harry Potter film, and it's kind of a comfort film for me, and I wanted to take my mind off all of the craziness that was going on in the world, so that's what I ended up watching. I don't really think I need to say much about this one. I love it. I ended up renewing my 9 out of 10 rating for this one, and yeah, it's just something that is kind of a way of escapism for me. Let me know in the comments if Harry Potter is part of your comfort watching experience as well, and if it is, which film is it? So that's it for my May wrap up. I am currently in the middle of rewatching Dark. As you know, 3rd season is coming out very soon, and I've been meaning to rewatch the first 2 for the longest time, so I'm excited. I'm finally doing it. I'm currently in the middle of season 2, and wow, the show is so good. We'll talk about that later. Let me know what you guys have been watching in May and how are you doing in general. Of course, I'm always looking for more suggestions, so leave them in the comments below. And as always, thank you so much for watching. Thank you to all of my patrons who are still supporting me on Patreon. A special thank you to all of the patrons whose names are on the screen right now, but also a huge thank you to everyone who's watching and who's made it to the end of this video. I appreciate every single one of you, and I hope you guys stick around. If you enjoyed this video, which I hope you did, please don't forget to give it a thumbs up, share it, subscribe to my channel if you haven't already, follow me on social media. Everything is linked in the info box below, and I hope you guys are having a great day. I will see you very soon in my next one. Bye!